Everyone.
Good to see you all. My name's Neil. I'm a wellbeing coach here, and with me today is Natalie, who's the wellbeing coach as well.
Hello.
So today we're going to be focusing around negative thought patterns that many of us can suffer with in terms of, we'll discuss things around how thoughts can have a real impact on feelings, and naturally we can respond to those feelings. So we'll have a good discussion around that. So I'm just going to quickly introduce you to Isorropia. We are a person-centered environment, so we actually get to understand people's struggles. And one of the key things that we when we work with people, find that many people struggle with the same kind of things in many respects. So we do these forums once a week, and we just have a subject matter. So we kind of have a loose conversation around it, but it will be guiding towards negative thought patterns, whether we suffer with them, and some tips and tricks at how to kind of recognize them first and maybe overcome some of them. It's not an easy thing to break, but after a period of time, when you get a little bit more of an insight and knowledge around it, it's certainly something that can be managed a little bit more effectively. So just to let you know, we are coaches, and I'd like to reiterate the fact that we're coaches. We both have lived experience along with many members of our staff. So we have probably suffered with some of the issues that you might be suffering with yourself. So we actually kind of recognize some things that helped us during our journey.
Definitely.
So today is really your forum. So we would appreciate if you have any burning questions or anything you'd like to ask us to, please post them up, and we will do our very best to kind of pick your things up. Sometimes we get a lot coming through, so we can't actually get every single one, but we will try our very best to kind of answer a few things for you. So we are not anything more than coaches. I'm not a trained therapist. Natalie is a therapist, but it is really, we look at person-centered stuff.
Definitely.
And we kind of guide ourselves around that. Now, just before we went on the live, we did set some questions. We went around the office and asked a few people about what kind of questions do you think people might pose when we're doing our workshops and things like that. So we have got a few questions that hopefully will pop up. We'll try and give you some insight around those, and that might actually entice you guys to post some questions. Just before we move on, just to let you know, this is an open forum, so if you do actually put any comments up, just be aware that everybody else will see your comments. So if you don't feel comfortable enough to do that, then don't. But the more the merrier, the more we can start thinking about this. So we'll just have a discussion amongst ourselves. So we've got a question up there that, to be fair, we set up because sometimes I've certainly found, Natalie, that sometimes we don't understand what thought patterns are and how they can have a massive, massive impact on our mental well-being.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a really interesting question there. What are negative automatic thoughts, and is it the same as negative core beliefs? So it's a little bit different in terms of your negative core beliefs. The stuff that kind of is been buried inside you really deep down, probably most of the time since childhood. And your negative automatic thoughts come off your core beliefs. So, for example, a core belief could be, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough. An automatic thought would be, when I'm walking around on my daily basis, I might think I'm going to fail at this.
Yeah.
It's those quick things that pop into your brain that you don't really necessarily always know where they've stemmed from, but they're on the surface, they're on the periphery all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite strange, isn't it, how often negative thought processes can take place.
Yeah.
A bit like you said, you're in the environment, the outer world, and something that is possibly not dangerous, but then we can actually start looking at that as being a danger. It's almost like crossing the road. Sometimes we can have that negative thought pattern, whereas if you cross the road, there's likelihood you're going to get run over.
Yeah.
The reality may be completely different.
Yeah. So the negative automatic thoughts, I'd say that kind of the ones that like pop into your head, like I said, but you might not even begin to notice that they're coming. They might have been around for such a long time. And the reason why this is such like a big topic in this and in counselling, any kind of therapy really, is because it's beginning to start looking at what those negative thoughts might be before you start breaking them down. Start noticing those negative thoughts. Sometimes it's about, I don't know, like Naomi says, one of our other wellbeing coaches you've probably seen on here before, she said that she has quite a lot of negative thoughts that pop into her head about being a failure or not being enough. And until she started recognizing what those thoughts were, so just identifying it was the first stage, then she could start breaking them down and flipping them to a more positive outlook. But, you know, the first step is always self-awareness.
Oh, absolutely. And we talk quite often, don't we? Of some people struggle with how they capture those thoughts, and we've got some tools, haven't we, that we encourage people to use. Is a bit like Natalie's just said, when you have that thought, is to capture it.
Yeah.
And you use a lot of good techniques, the same as all of us do. Once you've actually captured that information, you've got yourself enough time to kind of dissect. Because when we talk about thoughts, Natalie, you would absolutely agree with me, a thought turns to a feeling.
Yeah.
And then that feeling turns to a response.
Yeah.
And if we're constantly taking your scenario there, if you're constantly saying to yourself you're not worthy, then from the outset, you probably are going to feel like that. And the feeling then leads to a response effectively. And if you feel that you're not worthy, it's a blockage. You can stop doing things that you are quite possibly capable of doing, if that makes sense.
It could even, you know, it leads to all of those things, doesn't it? Like avoidance and everything. And we talk about in some of the workshops that, so say if I don't believe I'm worthy or I don't feel like I'm good enough, I might not go for a job interview.
Yes.
Then I won't get the job, will I? Because I haven't gone to the job interview. And it just has a knock-on effect, like Neil's saying. It links into all your emotions and all your moods just from that one negative automatic thought. Yeah. I think Kirsty's joined us. Hi, Kirsty. It's nice to see you, my lovely.
So just on the back of that, I know there's not many of you here, but what kind of negative thoughts have you kind of recognized that you might have on a regular basis, or some things that might actually stop you from doing certain things? I'll just give you a little scenario. When I was going through my journey, I kind of had those feelings that I'm not going to be a successful person. What I did is actually dismissed myself from a lot of opportunities as a direct result of that.
Exactly.
So I effectively then, a bit like Natalie's saying, avoided going into situations that I would probably be perfectly capable of doing. But because when I had that initial thought, the feelings kind of then led to my responses. And that can be kind of very much, it can be a sticking block for a lot of people, can it not?
Yeah, of course it can. You know, we talk about anxiety, don't we? The fact that, like, and this was one of the core things that I learned, I think, in managing my anxiety. And for those of you who don't know, Kirsty will know my OCD. But one of the core things for me to recognize was that when you're in that state of anxiety, you overestimate the threat and you underestimate your ability to cope with it. So you, like you're saying, Neil, when you were in that situation, you were overestimating the threat and underestimating your ability.
Absolutely.
You would have been, you know, now looking back, now you're out of it, that you can see that you would have been able to handle it. You probably would have been absolutely fine. But when we're in the middle of it, it's really hard to distinguish.
Absolutely. And that's where, you know, self-awareness comes in, doesn't it? Which is why we kind of do these forums, because sometimes you're really not aware of, you might have that thought and underestimating your ability to cope, or overestimating in that situation the threat.
Yeah.
Because and then when Natalie kind of talked about core beliefs and core things, if you're constantly going to that negative thought pattern, you're almost kind of almost confirming some of your beliefs. And they could be completely inaccurate.
They could be completely, because they, you know, we'll go on to that, won't we, where they morph over time. But I'm just going to read what Oh, hi Tina.
Hello,
Sorry.
Tina. All right.
Just going to read Kirsty. I've got better, but I'm still full of doubt. My parenting, my confidence at work is shaky too. Actually, the more I think about in my writing too, I get told a lot that I should write a book, even more so recently. Loads this week, but I can't see my own skill at all, and I feel like a fraud attempt to sell my feelings. And this is a really common thing, Kirsty. It's like feeling that imposter syndrome that I shouldn't be here. Someone's going to find me out in a minute. Someone's going to walk in here and tell me that I shouldn't be doing this job or whatever. I really feel for you because I think we've all been there, and even now sometimes. We can feel like that. It's about powering on through, Kirsty, and thinking about how much you've changed from the beginning to where you are now. You're just on that journey and you're going in the right direction. It's my monkey brain, isn't it? It is, Kirsty. You've been talking to Lisa then, have you?
Yeah, I was going to say that's Lisa.
Brilliant. What are some unhelpful thinking styles? Now, this is interesting. Kirsty and Tina may be able to remember this from the workshops, but has anyone heard of things like black and white thinking? When we're talking about unhelpful thinking styles, it's all part and parcel, isn't it, of being able to recognize when the way we are thinking is not being helpful or helping us to achieve our goals or motivating us or not making us very happy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, when you're talking about recognizing things, I think a lot of my issues was very much black and white thinking. It was all or nothing. And I didn't recognize that it doesn't have to be that way. There is a little gray area in between, which I didn't really investigate until I kind of understood that black and white thinking is actually quite irrational in many, many respects.
Yeah.
I can look back on certain scenarios that I've actually realized that I was black and white thinking. Just the other week, I went down to the co-op and I got really friendly with the staff in there, and I was encouraging my guys here to go down there to get their lunch because it was a really friendly environment like that. And then I went in a second time and I bumped into somebody. The experience was completely different. And I remember coming back and saying, don't go there, it's rubbish. So it just went from one direct to another. In hindsight, what happened in that middle, I don't know, but that person could have been in a completely different place. That person could have, I don't know, worst case scenario, could have been made redundant that day. They could have had a poorly child at home. So I recognized straight away, all or nothing can be quite damaging because you just effectively, in that scenario, for instance, I've cut off an opportunity to go to the shop, which is closed to me, and I'm going somewhere else.
It's a bit like, isn't it, tunnel vision?
Yes. Yeah,
it's like having your blinkers on, isn't it, and not seeing everything else that's going on around you as well sometimes. But what you just described there is a little bit related to disqualifying the positives as well. Because how often do we, and I'm particularly bad at this, and I've told you guys before on one of the Facebooks that I worked really hard to do a music exam when I was a teenager, and I got 98 points out of 100. And my first thing was, where did the other 2 points go? To my music teacher. And he literally sat there with his mouth open and went, what? Why are you not happy with this? Instantly went into the negative. Where did the 2 points? What did I get wrong? What did I get wrong? But I use that example because how often when we're looking at a situation, and that woman at co-op, it was just one day. How many times have you been there? Hundreds, probably.
Absolutely. And again, it's going back, isn't it? You don't recognize it early enough because now, in hindsight, I get your point. I completely understand. There's a completely grey area that I wasn't tapped into
at all.
It was very much one or the other. And then lots of those thoughts that you have lead to other negative thoughts, do they not?
Definitely.
We often say in our workshops about catastrophizing. How many of us can catastrophize?
Oh my God, all the time.
Situations.
All the time.
Absolutely.
All the time.
And then when you catastrophize and write your own dialogue and your own story, your feelings start to change as a result of that.
Massively. And it's about it for me with catastrophizing, and it is part and parcel of having anxiety. It's about nipping it in the bud with me. I've always had a vivid imagination since I was a kid. I have, but as I've got older, that imagination's not always served me very well. And you guys will know what I'm on about in terms of anxiety. And I have to stop myself. I have to really nip it. Like the other day, my partner had a pain in his arm, and he said, it's been hurting all day and all evening. My brain instantly, so this is jumping to conclusions now, he's having a heart attack.
Yeah.
He's having a heart attack. I've gone to bed earlier than him, and I'm thinking, am I laying upstairs while he's downstairs having a heart attack? Do I get him in the car? Do I phone an ambulance? And I just thought, nip it in the bud. I'd let it spiral out of control already. And, you know, it's about recognizing it's going to happen sometimes. I was tired. I was going to bed. My guards were down, my boundaries were down. And it was about recognizing, hang on, you're having that thought pattern again. Nip it in the bud. Let's deal with it when it happens. Just going to read what Kirstys put. I've been learning acceptance commitment therapy. It's game-changing knowledge, but I really struggle to apply it, even though I can happily support other people through this stuff. Learning acceptance commitment therapy. That sounds amazing, Kirsty. And once you've done teaching everyone else, you can come teach me, because I want to know about that. I think it sounds really good. So, why is it important to identify unhelpful thinking styles? Isn't that going to make it worse? Wow, it's a difficult one, isn't it? And this is something that we get asked quite a lot of the time, because people think, and when I say people, me, I've thought it, that if I ignore it, it'll go away. If I try and identify my negative thought patterns, then I'm going to be giving it attention. I'm going to be magnifying it. It's going to make it worse. It's not going to go away if I ignore it, though. It's the classic bury your head in the sand. In fact, most of the time, if we ignore something, or what does Charlie say?
I always say, what we resist persists.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way, you know, when we've done a little bit of work, the same as yourself, that's absolutely true in the fact that, using your phrase, you can bury yourself in the sand, if you want to call it that.
You bury your head in the sand, yeah.
And the reason why we do that is because it's uncomfortable. It's because it's alien to us, and we want to try and get back into our comfort area as quickly as we possibly can, and that's resistance.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like we said, once you identify how unhelpful thinking patterns can have a massive impact on our mental well-being, then it is when it says, does it make it worse? This is just my view, Natalie. Sometimes it does make it worse, but it brings it into focus. In terms of, you might write something down and you might actually feel worse. But you've recognized that if you continue to ignore that, then it's just going to keep on hurting. It's going to keep getting worse.
I was reading about a case study the other day about this man who didn't like public speaking, and he was visiting his therapist, and they worked on this together. It's a whole chapter of this CBT book. And basically, they had to get to the bottom of why he didn't like speaking. And the therapist just kept asking questions. Said, so why don't you want to public speak? Why are you so nervous? Why are you so anxious? What if I make a fool out of myself? Okay, what if you do make a fool out of yourself? What's going to happen then? What's going to happen next? Well, I might go really shaky and pale. Okay. What if you go really shaky and pale? What's going to happen next? And he kept, like, this is just one example, and it wouldn't work for everything. He just kept saying, but what next? What next? What next? And when I was reading, I thought, yeah, it is so true, isn't it? It's about following that thought pattern through. So not ignoring it, not resisting it, not burying your head in the sand. So, okay, let's follow your thought pattern through, and let's see where it takes us. Where are we going to end up? And in the end, you know, he couldn't come up with any reasons. It's really, really interesting.
Sounds
He
interesting.
said, well, what if you do faint? What do you think people are going to think if you faint publicly? Well, I suppose most people would be quite nice about it, wouldn't they? Well, yeah, of course they would be. They'd make sure you were all right, wouldn't they? Yeah, probably. Brilliant.
So
Just
that
keep
enables
pushing
you to flip the negative
into the positive.
into the positive, which is what we often say, is once you kind of start to identify, it becomes a lot easier and a lot less painful to start switching,
Yeah.
doesn't it? So you kind of, when we're not very well, we can get focused very much on the negatives, which will lead to another negative and another negative. We often talk about how we speak to ourselves, and we get you guys to kind of think about gratitude and positivity and talking to yourself in a different language. And these are all good tools, but they do take a long time to kind of master. There's no doubt about that. But just going on the back of that, that's so interesting. That's a really good tip, is because he's almost asking another question and then says, what if? And then, like you said, at the end of it, he runs out of steam.
Yeah.
So there's, that really identifies the fact that your thought pattern could be so distorted.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of flipping it and saying, well, I've done that process and I've obviously come to a conclusion that is not exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And that's how you start to develop your skills to enable yourself to manage some of these.
If anyone's interested in stuff like that, there's also one that they did with a woman who was scared about fainting at work. She was really, and it stopped her from going to work. So the therapist made her pretend to faint to see how everyone reacted. And when she obviously it wasn't that sudden. She'd seen the therapist, I think, for about 6 to 8 weeks before this, and they built it up. She kept feeling sick and that she was going to faint. And then the therapist said, right, I want you to go to work and I want you to pretend to faint by the photocopier in the middle of the office. And she did it.
Yeah.
She did it. And she found out then, because she challenged it, it's all about challenging your negative thought patterns. Like you said, sometimes your thought pattern is so distorted. She fainted. She woke up, she fake fainted. She then came round to her colleagues and they were all really caring and said, can I get you a glass of water? Do you want to sit here? Do you need something to eat? Have you had lunch?
It's quite amazing, isn't it, Nat? Because you've done work the same as I have, how kind of so ingrained those things can be.
Yeah,
like you were just saying about that scenario at the photocopier. I'm sure that in real life, many people would respond exactly how they responded, caring, kind.
Yeah.
You know, but we look at it completely different. That's when I said sometimes it can be so distorted.
Yeah.
And going back to what we were saying, sometimes, it's hard to start capturing thoughts because they can create other things, but it is chipping away at those things, isn't it?
It is chipping away, yeah. Kirstys, but the book Who Moved My Cheese was a helpful insight into moving. Who moved my cheese?
I've actually,
that's amazing.
Kirsty, I think I've read that
helpful
book.
Insight
yes.
into moving with changes and what the focus
should be.
And should be.
Yeah.
That sounds really interesting. Kirsty, who wrote the book? I'll have a look at. I'll look up.
I'm pretty sure, Natalie. Look it up. But I'm pretty sure I've got that book in my house.
Will you be able to bring it in?
Yes.
Then?
Yeah.
There you go. How do automatic thoughts have an impact on my moods and emotions?
I'd like to just say, you guys, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think when you're thinking about something that is negative? What kind of mood does that put you in? Yeah. If you're having a negative thought, it could create sadness. If you're having a good thought, it could create happiness. Yeah. And on the back of that, what's the kind of emotion you're feeling?
Yeah.
So it's a really good question to ask you kind of guys. Have you got any kind of scenarios of, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, obviously my automatic thoughts, just if I'm going to be in a state of fight or flight, I'm going to be fearful, I'm going to be restless, I'm going to be probably snappy with people as well. So it's not only what you're feeling, what your mood and emotion is, but it's how you're interacting with everyone else around you as well. And if you are snappy with people, they're not going to really probably respond that well to it, and therefore you're going to dig yourself a bigger hole, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit like you say, you might have a situation that frustrates you, especially in a work environment. You might have something that frustrates you. It makes you feel low, or it makes you feel sad, sorry, or it makes you feel angry. And if you kind of respond to that, if Natalie and I had that kind of interaction, then Natalie's going to have an emotive change. So we might start to get into aggression. And then the actual thing that would happen in that kind of scenario is either we stop having a connection,
Yeah.
or we have a connection that's kind of semi-broken, if you like. We'd be fearful of each other from time to time.
Probably wouldn't want to be around
We
each
wouldn't
other.
want to be around each other, and we wouldn't be able to share some things that are frustrating us. So you can kind of see where we're coming from on that one.
Kirstys put, it exhausts me because I literally argue with myself in my head.
Hmm.
I'm just tired and pissed off with myself for still having a manic brain all the time. Kirsty, I know sometimes it's so tiring. It is. Sometimes it feels like you are constantly having an argument with yourself in your brain. I completely get that. Just make sure that you're not disqualifying the positives when, has it become less so? The more you've worked on yourself, has it become easier in any way? You said that quite a lot of things have, like the books, changed the way you're thinking, and the course and stuff like that you've been doing. It's worse now sometimes because I'm functioning so much better in other areas. That's a really interesting point, actually. Go back to the wheel of stability. Go back to the wheel of stability for sure, because sometimes when we've been excelling in one area, we've forgotten another one. And I'm a classic one for that. In the past, when I've been pub managing, for sure, work has come before everything else, and I'm excelling in my career. You're the same.
Yeah.
In the past, we've been excelling in our careers, haven't we?
Yeah.
And then not had any time with family, friends, sleep, food,
Yeah.
exercise, the rest, the whole caboodle.
And we talk a little bit about that when, I don't know if any of you guys remember, but the wise mind is connecting with both elements of that.
Both sides of the wise mind. Tina's put frozen, can't move, eat, angry. Okay, is that connected to your negative automatic thoughts, my lovely? Tina has put that she hates herself as well. Tina, I'm sorry to hear that, my lovely. You're such a lovely person. I don't know how anyone could hate you, let alone yourself. But definitely keep on working on those kind of negative thoughts that are surrounding that. So, that I'm not good enough, or I should have done this, I must have done that, and things like that. You need to start flipping it around. If you can start thinking about positive affirmations. And one great thing about positive affirmations, though, we've actually said before, is if you cannot think of your own positive affirmations to start with, go online, Google positive affirmations, get a book of positive affirmations.
And that's an interesting point. There is so much information out there, but when we're kind of in that situation, sometimes we can kind of lose focus on that. When you're talking about stuff like that, there's always there's the apps that you can get, there's Google that you can get. Positive affirmations, some people really struggle with to start. But again, in these situations, it's really using all the tools you possibly can. When we're talking about coaching, my experience, the same with other people's experience, I think we all found that the more knowledge we get around these things, the easier it becomes. And I was coming through my journey, Nat, coming to workshops, but I was also doing my own research, reading books, looking at how I can kind of put some of the tools into action, if that makes sense. I'm just going to touch on, Tina, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
And it's just an open question, Tina. When you say, I hate myself, is there anything in particular that you hate, or you feel that you hate yourself about? Because this I don't want to fuel the fire.
No.
But this is an interesting point, because we just spoke about black and white thinking, didn't we? And this is where I'm thinking that comments like that is an ideal thing to start looking at that, because almost like I can understand why you're saying it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really kind of identify anything that is particularly might be struggling you.
Yeah.
Because when you say I hate myself, I am sure that you don't hate yourself on every single element of what's happening for you.
Yeah.
You might be saying that you hate yourself and discarding some of the stuff and the qualities that you clearly possess, Tina. You've been with us and you constantly are working on your well-being. That's a positive.
Definitely.
Yeah. And sometimes we can miss that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We get our blinkers on, a bit like you said a bit earlier.
And it's the same as like when when we ask people, what are you self-disciplined in? Well, I'm not a very disciplined person. I'm not. Well, did you have a shower this morning? Yeah. Well, that's self-discipline.
Yeah.
Do you brush your teeth? Yeah. Every morning? Yeah. Well, that's self-discipline. It's just that you're not self-disciplined in maybe certain areas that you'd like to be. Doesn't mean you're not self-disciplined at all. And that's what you're saying to Tina, is that you might hate yourself about a couple of bits, which we wish you didn't, but that's up to you. But there's got to be some elements there, Tina, that you're really, happy with yourself or pleased.
That's exactly what I was trying to get to. So thank you for that.
That's all right. Kirstys just put, so when I do have those moments, it's just a spiral of me looking at the evidence of my improvement. I'm like, yes, I've got this, I'm doing it. Then my head pulls me back to all the shitty things from the past and back and forth. Tina, it does get better. I felt exactly the same as you did when I started here. I'm still learning and practicing, but it does come. It really is a journey. It's brilliant, Kirsty. Thank you for saying that. And thanks for saying it to Tina as well. Because it really is a journey. And I honestly think that it's a journey that most of us will be on our whole lives.
I often say that because often get asked that. I don't think you can do kind of programs like this, and it's not even about Isorropia, it's about life in general.
Yeah.
We will have struggles. We will have times where we will have negative thoughts that lead to different kind of outcomes or behaviors, if you want, whatever you want to call it. And it's not something you can just switch on and switch off. I often get asked that. And for me, my mental health management is a daily thing that I choose to do.
Yeah.
So if I have situations and I now have an insight and recognize that I need to choose the right pathway, then I can lead a more comfortable life for me and feel happier about my life.
Definitely.
So it is a constant kind of thing. And Kirsty, just going back to what you were saying, what you tend to find is a number of people are on this journey for a constant period of time. It's not something that will just kind of switch into place. I love the scenario that you said about self-discipline, and that really recognizes that sometimes we can dismiss a lot of the things
a lot of the stuff we do.
And when we're saying linking into positive thoughts rather than negative, that's where for me I got so much personal gain, is rather than actually focusing on the negative, I started to dissect and look at the positives.
Yeah.
So what if I don't go to this party that I'm anxious about, that I'm worried about? And then focusing on, if I don't go, I'm going to miss out. I might actually enjoy myself and all those positive things.
All the other options, like you said, it's all the shades of grey in between, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not like, right, so for you, let's give you as an example. If you went to the party, you were going to be anxious and you were going to have a horrible time. If you didn't go, you'd be comfortable because you'd be in your comfort zone. They're the black and white thinking. So it's ignoring all the other options in between, which would have been, I might actually enjoy myself, might be anxious for the first 10, 15 minutes, and then the anxiety is going to die down a bit, and I'm actually going to talk to some old friends or old family. If I stay at home, I might be comfortable initially, but all I'm doing is actually feeding into the anxiety. It's not that black and white, is it? There is all the other options.
Yes, absolutely.
Just putting Tina's said, So I'm just going to go back up because I missed that. Told mental health team something that got my son in trouble. Tina, I'm sure that that isn't your fault, my lovely. I'm absolutely positive, you know. Kirsty, people say we're recovering from trauma, but I don't use that term. We're evolving all the time. I like it. Sorry. Brilliant. That's Tina replying to Kirsty, just saying thank you. Daniel LaFour. After 3 suicide attempts, 1 failed marriage, losing contact with friends and family, and being with Isorropia for almost 3 years, I can tell everyone that it does get easier, but it does mean hard work. Yeah, perfect, Daniel. You've summed it up, haven't you? You've summed it up, and I thank you so much for coming on here and saying that. It's very brave, and it's also showing a real insight into what we're trying to do from your experience, which is absolutely brilliant because it is hard work.
It's no doubt that was the key thing that stuck out on that comment for me. It's not an easy process. And Daniel, you know, after your experiences with Isorropia and obviously all the situations you've been through, you probably would agree it's not an easy thing. But the good thing is you are kind of in a situation now where you've got some insight. You kind of recognize that some of these things can still have an impact on you. Yeah. But if you work on these things, they do become easy or easier. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that, again, quite often people ask me when I was not very well to get in towards wellness. They often used to ask me, how did you get to well so quick? And I said, well, what well to me is completely different than to you. Wellness. Yeah. So going back to the time
and journey.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So it is very much that.
Well done, Daniel. So inspiring. Takes a big chunk of self-compassion too. Hats off to you, sir. Love it. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for coming on here and saying that. Have we got another question ready?
Let's see if we have. Oh, there we go.
When I get emotional, I can't always pinpoint the emotion or the negative automatic thought. It's like it's all going on at the same time and I'm just overwhelmed. How do I overcome this? It's really important, isn't it? When we talk about emotional regulation, sometimes we've got a whole gamut of different emotions going on at the same time. And we also know that some emotions, such as like anger, serve as an umbrella emotion, don't they?
Yeah.
So they're covering up for some of our anxieties, depression, frustration, guilt, shame, blame. All of that comes under that umbrella. So it's really interesting to start by trying to name the emotion, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, wouldn't you say that sometimes people struggle with even naming that?
Yeah.
I'll give you a little scenario that happened between me and Lisa. Lisa works with Duty. Just this week, she was doing a workshop with me, and she immediately said, as we were walking into the workshop, she said, "I'm highly anxious."
Yeah.
And I said, "Stop." I said, "Are you anxious or are you concerned?"
Yeah.
Because of the way that kind of she spoke to herself, that anxiety heightened and made it worse. Whereas when I spoke to her and said it's a concern, it kind of softens it a bit.
It does
and get a little bit of an understanding around it.
It does, yeah. I think when you think about all of these emotions that are going around, we get quite often people say that I don't know what emotion's going on at one time, which is completely understandable because sometimes it's just everything at once, isn't it? The best way I've dealt with it in the past is by noticing my physical response.
Body response.
Yeah. Physical body response first, and then try and get what emotion I'm feeling from that. So, for example, I'll just give you a really simple one. If I'm anxious, my heart races, and I get quite tunnel vision, and my palms get sweaty and stuff like that. So I know that I'm anxious. I know that's what I'm feeling. And I've said to some of you guys before about having a panic attack and it feeling like a heart attack to the point that I went to A&E. Now this was now a couple of years ago, but now I've had those feelings since. I can calm myself down because I go, it's just anxiety. Name that fear. Just name it. It loses its power. But you know, you can do this with any kind of feelings, and just trying to pick them apart will help you pinpoint the negative automatic thought. And like with anything, the more you practice it, the easier it will get to break down. I hope that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense to me.
And one of the ways that I found, you know, probably the easiest way to start doing that was to keep a diary or a thought journal with prompts that actually get me to write stuff down. And when I initially started doing it, I mean, I didn't know what was going on. It was all a bit of a muddle. But then the more I thought about it over time, and now this has been years that I've done this kind of thing, I can now separate. I know what my emotion is. I know what my negative automatic thought was. I know what my reaction was. I know why my reaction was like it is. And then I can try and think of a positive outcome. I'm not saying all the time, but the more I've practiced it over the years, the easier it has become.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. This is practice, isn't it?
It's all about practice.
And it's capturing when this is happening. I like the fact that to identify emotions, for me, that was the perfect scenario. Identifying what's happening in my body.
Yeah.
Because your body is telling you that something either needs to change or you need to do something about it. And then when we're talking about anxiety, most people with anxiety will have telltale signs happening in their body.
Definitely.
Same as sadness. There will be telltale signs in your body before you get to that point.
And, you know, when we've done like low mood and high mood, so recognizing your low self and your high self, being able to know not necessarily what the triggers are, but what is going wrong first that makes you slip into your low self is really important. And I think I've said this on the foundation course to most people, is that when I'm slipping into my low self, one of the first things that will go is me eating healthily.
Mm-hmm.
So I start skipping meals, or I eat rubbish. I've got no motivation or inclination to want to cook anything. And I love cooking, but that's when I know I'm slipping into my low self. I start going to the shop and getting microwave meals, things you can bung in the oven, things like that. Now, because I can recognize that, I go, hang on, I'm slipping in to my low self there. There's something going on, and I then have to try and pull myself back up. That's the first step.
Yeah.
That's always the first step into my low self. But I'm just going to read what Tina put, because I think that was a lovely metaphor. Yeah. If you drew a rainbow left, it just black and white, you would lose all the real beauty of the whole picture. That's brilliant.
Brilliant.
Kirstys put, I wrote a poem. Oh, hang on, I've got to go back up. I wrote a poem about recognizing triggers. Most of my writing is based on the evolution of me, emotions and all. I love it. I'd love to see it. Can you send it to me? Please. Yeah. I think that sounds amazing. Okay, so are we ready for another question, I think? How do I go about challenging my thought pattern when I've been doing it so long?
Well, that's a tough one, but I think we've probably covered a few aspects, haven't we? Yeah. How do I go about challenging my thoughts? And I think Natalie and I have just said, first of all, you've got to capture some information.
Yeah.
If you haven't got the information,
then
you don't have a pathway to start breaking some of these things. So that's the first thing I would say.
Yeah.
Is when you're talking about thought patterns, is a bit like you said, it doesn't have to be a diary, it doesn't have to be anything. There's a couple of people that I speak to that do something, they called it the other day, a brain dump. Yeah. So they kind of, before they retire and go to bed, whatever is happening in their head at that point in time, they write it down. In this scenario, a lot of she was explaining this to me, a lot of what she was writing down had passed, had gone,
Yeah.
but she still captured the information. And then there was some thoughts that she brain dumped that were quite hurtful, but she's now got into the situation is she writes these things down and she dissects the ones that she needs to work on, and a lot of the others she throws away, and she said she even burns some of them.
I think
that's just thought capturing.
I think definitely the difference between like a brain dump and a thought diary is because in a thought diary you are finding the negatives, but you also try and switch it to the positives at the end. You can keep a thought diary. I'd say a brain dump, if it is going to be all bad stuff, I would definitely burn it or put a line through it or bin it, because you don't want to keep rereading.
No, these are just little tricks that we kind of we get a lot of feedback, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, this scenario was about a lot of thoughts that was keeping somebody up at night. They weren't all kind of negative thoughts. There was a lot of positives, but she captured that information, you know, and got rid of the others. But you're right, there's so many different ways. So going back to the question, if you've been doing it for so long, I think the first port of call really is to start capturing some information, and that allows you to create a kind of a pathway of things that you need to do. Because it's fair to say, is it not, what resists persists, going back to that. And if we don't actually do something about these things, then we kind of naturally just get stuck where we are.
Yeah, and that's you why still we have the same thought patterns, won't you? It'll just go round and round like a loop. It is really difficult when you've had these thought patterns for such a long time, and quite a lot of them can be based on memories of negative experiences or anything like that, and we completely get it. You know, Kirsty mentioned trauma earlier. It's a massive one, and can, you know, if you're suffering from PTSD, it can be triggered at any time. It's just, I suppose it's just so important, like you're saying, is to become self-aware of them, just so you recognize what actually is going on for you, why you feel a certain way. So I've done quite a lot of investigations about myself, and where I've thought, why am I being so upset about that? Why does that upset me so much? Why does that annoys me so much? And now, and this has taken time, don't get me wrong, like this, I don't think it comes naturally to anyone. I think you have to practice it. Over time, I've been able to trace it back and go, yeah, that kind of resonates with that, and that reminds me of this, and that's why I feel so upset about it. That's why it's bothering me so much. And just that understanding has relaxed me, because I've been able to find a reason for it. You know, sometimes when we think we're going mad in our own head, go, why am I so bothered? Why? And then you know, like Kirsty was saying earlier, you get angry with yourself, you start having an argument with yourself. It's about finding that link work for yourself, right? That links to that. That reminds me of that. That I've been triggered by that. Okay, now I can see how everything's working in my brain a little bit. So that makes sense. So I find it so interesting. I'm just going to go back. Do you want to read Kirsty's poem out?
Where's Kirsty's
you give
poem?
It a go. There.
Right.
Start there. I think it's called Practice.
It's called Practice. Okay. The trigger committer. They're coming in quicker. Panic emitter. Senses, strains bigger. Hearts missed a flicker. Self-spite spitter, making you sicker. Self-thought snigger. So sit by the river. Don't let it linger. They're not your killer. They'll make you a winner. Just look at them in the mirror and try to consider the trigger committer.
Love it.
That is brilliant.
That is so
that
good.
Is fantastic.
Kirsty. That's brilliant.
Kirsty, have you copyrighted it?
Yeah. See it popping it up on Isorropia website.
Exactly.
Written by Neil Nat. Yeah. No, that is brilliant, Kirsty. Thank you for sharing that. We might actually want that put on the main Facebook page at some point. It's really good. Kirsty's also put a gratitude diary works good. Before bed too, makes the lonely bedtime thoughts much nicer. Brilliant. And again, it's a different time for everyone, isn't it? Because
Absolutely.
I'm the same as Kirsty. Like before I go to bed is probably my worst time in terms of anxiety. Start thinking about through the day. Did I say that? Did I do that? What did someone think about me with that? So gratitude at night's really good for me.
And that's a really key thing, isn't it, as well, Nat? It's different for everybody because yours is of an evening.
Yeah.
My problems can start first thing in the morning.
There you go.
You know, in
it's
terms
because
of,
I'm not awake first thing in the morning.
yeah,
That's
it
right.
probably is.
I'm still asleep.
And I've kind of recognised where a lot of my negative thought patterns is in the morning kind of defines my day, if that makes sense. I read something the other day where there's been some scientific work around it, but this guy was saying that there's so many people that set their day up from what the first thing they do when they get out of bed. And I started to think, hang on a minute, I do this because the first thing I do, naturally, well, a lot of people do it, is you pick up your phone and you go to a news. I go to Sky News.
There you go.
If it's kind of
trouble,
bad news first thing in the morning,
yeah,
then my brain starts to just race, and then you start thinking about lots of other things. So when we're talking about this, it is unique. So when we talk about things, some things work for some people, they might not work for others, but they're all kind of enabling us to kind of identify where that kind of thing lies. And I love your little scenario about dissecting it. Hang on a minute, that kind of links with that.
And see, just you doing that investigation about what do I do first thing in the morning. I'm on Sky News. If there's like anything that, because we all know what the news is like, it's very sensational, isn't it? So they're going to put pictures on Sky News, aren't they? That are going to be headline grabbing. They're going to be grab your attention. So if you start the day with that, you might already be anxious before you've even got out of bed.
Absolutely, it does. For me, it defines your day.
Yeah.
So going back to when we're talking about how you can change these things, when my scenario there is quite simple. What I do now is I do not pick up Sky News in the morning.
Yeah.
That's not saying that I don't watch the news, but I watch it at the right kind of time. For instance, I don't watch it before I go to bed. It might be a snippet during the day, and I'll watch Sky News.
Yeah.
So it's not kind of just breaking that out for me. It was just stopping it from when it can actually create kind of feelings. And I hate the word behaviours, but behaviours as a direct result of that.
Of course. And you only found that out by doing the investigations.
Absolutely.
But this is the thing, about any kind of investigation. My friend said to me, because nighttime, as I just said, the anxiety is higher. She said, "You're going on social media late at night." Actually, yeah, I am. Why don't you stop going on social media after a certain time? So why don't you just set yourself a time that you're not going to be on social media? Oh yeah, all right, I'll try that. Tried it, works the dream. I'm not looking at social media before I go to bed because that is my anxious time. Just going to go back up. I think we had one from Ian. Did we?
I did see an Ian. Oh, there we
go. Ian, yeah, there we go.
And now you've knocked off. It's the other one.
Hi, Nasty and Neil. Oh, hang on. I can't read the bit in the middle.
Let's try and
Go on, out. You do that. No, scroll down.
Is it down?
Yeah.
Right, there you go.
Hi, Nasty and Neil. I've been struggling with a lot, as you know, but I haven't been able to get any understanding. It still is guilt when I'm having me time. Ian, I know exactly what you mean. I am a nightmare. Well, any of these will attest to it as well. Is that I have to actually rotor it in sometimes. I know that sounds really sad. It does, but
it doesn't to me, guys.
I've got a self-care journal for the first time in my 36 years, and I actually write in it now. Saturday afternoon, relax, and that's all I put in it. And somehow, I don't know how quite yet this is working in my brain, but it does. Because I've put it in, to my diary that that's the plan, it's helping me to not feel guilty when I'm doing it. I don't know why, might be tricking myself, but it's working at the minute.
That's kind of reconditioning your brain in many aspects.
Could be, yeah, could be. Kirstys put, I'm diagnosed CPTSD, so I'm holding to high expectations of myself, maybe. Yeah. Always high expectations, my lovely. Always high expectations. That comes down. Actually, I was going to mention that earlier about unhelpful thinking patterns. Disqualifying the positives, black and white thinking, all comes down to perfectionism, doesn't it? And too high expectations, I think. Bridget's put more poetry, definitely.
You know why I'm looking at you,
Why?
don't you? When we're talking about perfectionism.
Just staring at me.
That is something that was identified, to be fair, by Natalie. But you did suffer a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Oh dear.
With that?
Awful. Awful person. Terrible business. It's terrible.
Which is why, guys, I just smiled when she was telling the story.
It is something that I have to actually work on a daily basis, because going back to that public speaking thing that I was reading, the reason I think I found it so interesting was because sometimes I can get anxious about doing like a public workshop. I think we all do a little bit, don't we?
Yeah.
And I had to think, what if it doesn't go perfectly? What actually is going to happen if it doesn't go perfectly? Everyone's still going to be safe. No one's going to be hurt. The building's not going to be on fire, or do you see what I mean? So in my brain, again, black and white thinking, isn't it? I have to be perfect, or it's not worth doing at all.
Yeah, and
that's wrong, and we know that is an unhelpful thinking pattern, isn't it? So just going up to that, replying to Bridget, if you can, get along to Linda's creative writing group. They're amazing, and half the reason I'm able to write about this stuff. Very true. They are great in there. Kirsty's put, no, I haven't got any more poetry, but I'm happy. Oh, she hasn't copywritten it. Brilliant.
Oh,
I'm happy for you to share with my name. I've shared it at work at Inclusion. Thank you, Kirsty. Thanks for your permission. Ian's put, I'm actually doing that, lol, which is brilliant. Schedule it in. See, sometimes the simplest things do have really positive effect.
Absolutely.
Go down. Ian, I'm perfect and not being perfect. That's what I need to start. That needs to be my mantra, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely.
I think maybe if I say that to myself, I'll be all right. Tina's put, I can't see past the fear. I don't know what to do every day. Is a nightmare. My son could lose his son. Yeah, Tina, that's a really, really difficult situation. But one that I don't think that you've caused. I think, if this actually happens, that your son does lose his son, then I'm sure that you're not to blame about that. But if you want to talk about it, you know where we are. Just give us a call, Tina. Yeah?
So on that note, guys, we've reached that lovely time, and almost 1 o'clock. So first of all, thank you very much for your input. It's been really helpful to us. Hopefully we've kind of guided you through some of those questions today, and I'm going to spit my teeth out. So don't forget, you can always contact us. We're here 9 to 5. So do give us a ring if you find that you need to, any struggles or anything like that. And we will be back. Have we got one next week? Because we're getting close to Christmas, guys. So
I think it may be the following week.
I think it might be the following week.
We are doing a couple over the Christmas week as well, which are going to be advertised on Facebook shortly. Just at crucial points. So please join in for that. So we're not on our tods. That would be amazing.
And on that note, we'll bid you farewell. It's been nice talking to you, and we'll see you very soon. Happy Christmas if we don't see you before.
Thank you. Bye.